Our next guest is someone whose work has shaped not just how we design, but who we design for and why that matters. Dr. Jutta Treviranus is the director of Inclusive Design Research Center at OCAD University and the founder of the Inclusive Design Institute. She's established the world's first graduate program in inclusive design. She's advised international accessibility standards. She's led award-winning research on equitable AI, and she's helped major public and private organizations build systems that center around human uniqueness from the ground up. I am so very honored to have her with us today. Her impact on this field has been profound. So welcome. I'm so excited you're here. Would you be willing to start by sharing a bit of your story, how you came into the work of inclusive design, what pulled you into it in the first place?
Okay. Well, a long time ago, back in 1979, when I was graduating, my first job was to work with 12 university students. And it was to determine how they could participate in university fully. And these amazing group of individuals were beginning their university career right at the emergence of the personal computer. And so I thought, oh, wow, here is a wonderful translation device. And the barriers that they were experiencing was the whole range. And so we started to experiment and we developed things like text to speech to text, alternative keyboards. And at that time, it was sort of a skunk works. You could do almost anything. You could hack the computer far more. It's like, the old cars that the mechanics were able to play with. But now, of course, they're so complex that you no longer can. And so with this group of students, I was hooked. So I thought, wow, here is an opportunity to create systems that are one size fits one. Because, of course, each of the students was so different, and we needed to create a whole variety of different things. So it wasn't like a building that you're creating where you only have one door, right? You can't sort of quickly change the door the minute somebody who requires something else arrives. So, of course, there are other strategies there, but the mutability and the ability to reshape and be responsive in these digital systems was what hooked me. But the biggest part that hooked me is the ability to work with people who have to be resourceful, like a whole very, very diverse group of people who can't be complacent, who cannot assume that the world is going to work for you. And so the innovative things we did at the time, where it was just such it was a great experience. I mean, to be able to be so creative.
Did that naturally lead into the progression of your career, or was
Oh,
it?
yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Once the it gave me a lot of insights into how we design our world. What are the systems within our society that lead to risks and issues, not just for people who have disabilities, but also for just anyone. And at the time, I mean, one of the things in reflecting back, now that you're having me think about the past, is I was very naive. I thought it would continuously progress, right? Things would get better and better. We would all become,
That's
we
kind
would
of my
all,
current mindset, so just beware. You're like, spoilers ahead.
yeah. So that, yeah, we would all become wiser. We would all start to understand this. We would have more equity. We would recognize just how important it is that everybody can participate. But of course, the other thing that over my career since 79, things have gone up and down. And it's been sort of a reinforcement of many of the things that I realized at that time, that when we don't consider diversity, then we're not prepared for the times when we all face crisis, when we design just for the complacent average or for things that are typical, or and I'm in academia now, right? So I think academia has a lot to account for in terms of the reduction of truth and evidence to largely statistical reasoning and statistical impact, and how we've designed our systems of promotion, our funding, our what we deem to be publishable, all of that. But also, I see how it permeates, of course, our markets, our politics, our yeah, the various things. So yes, that did start me down in both a practical and a philosophical bent on what we have to change this. I mean, this is just wrong, and I'm hoping people understand just where we're taking the world if we don't address the needs of that are recognize that we're all very diverse, and recognize that we should be designing for that diversity, that's where there's innovation, that's where we prepare for the unexpected. That's the truth that we haven't as yet uncovered, that or the unexplored knowledge domain that we really need to explore, etc. All of those things that are the clarion call of, I don't know, governments, companies, etc. We're missing them, right? We're looking in the wrong direction.
It like immediately came to mind as wondering, what is the most useful way for pushing this forward? We've been advocating for this for a really long time, and you've seen back and forths. Is in my mind, I'm like leading by example, or I don't know, just like really just constantly being the forerunner and the advocate, like very vocally. Like, has there been something that has just helped you to push it forward, whether on different projects, companies, like globally, whatever the scope?
My team says Juta's response to everything is diversity. And so I push against this notion that there's one winning way to do it, or one appropriate way, or one best way. In fact, I don't like using the word or the solution even, because what's the solution for one person may not be for another. And if we assume that we've solved it and fixed it and dismissed it, then we're missing out on people. So, and I'm not very judgmental in terms of the approach that we take. I mean, I take whatever approach I can. And you have to be opportunistic, you have to be resourceful. And depending on the context and what organization you're in, or what resources you have around you, it's very, very different approaches. So I don't like to answer that question with a single thing, but I can answer it with an anecdote. One of the things, well, this is one of those optimism, pessimism things. During the pandemic, I thought, there was a lesson that kept being repeated, which was none of us are safe unless all of us are safe. And I thought, oh, wow, maybe we'll learn from this particular crisis. And for a while, I think there were quite a number of things that emerged. But of course, it again was the cycle, the action reaction. And unfortunately, we didn't continue to attend to that particular lesson, although I think there were some changes. But that would be somewhat tragic if the only way that we can move forward with this is because of a crisis, as a way to mobilize people. But I am coming to think that is the case. So the thing that surprises me, or that is one of the ways in which this happens. The thing that surprised me is with the geopolitical issues at the moment, that especially here in the US, it has caused a mobilization of so many people. I mean, it has woken up this groundswell of people who are now extremely supportive. I'm hoping that's not what it always takes, but Maybe sometimes we have to get as low as possible before we recognize, oh my, we need a change. This has to change. And much of what we require is a really fundamental change.
I love that.
I
Thank you
actually,
for sharing that. Sorry,
I
Catherine.
want to jump in and ask you. This is a while ago now, but I'm still curious about it when you were talking about this. You mentioned kind of from a more like practical, technical standpoint, when you were working with these students doing text to speech and adaptive inputs. I wondered kind of how much that has changed between that time and now, because those are still technologies that are crucial for access now that we're working to accommodate when building web apps and software.
Yeah.
As you were saying that, I was like, oh, for some reason, I would have thought that would be different, or there would be different technologies, or we would have changed to something newer and better. And I wonder how much that's the case, or how much we're still doing the same kind of
Yeah, and in fact, there were further alternatives for many people back then, because, well, further alternatives in the research space, or well, and even in the small medium enterprise space. So, for example, in terms of someone, say, who has very limited, poorly controlled movement, we had a huge range of possible alternative keyboards, alternative ways of moving a pointer, alternative ways if you couldn't directly access. So rather than simply a single switch row column scanning and things like that, or yeah, there's not many alternatives actually on the market at the moment. You could use whatever movement you had and then create a code, designate something to happen with that particular thing. The issue is that the market takes over and there's economies of scale, and because there is such huge diversity amongst people with disabilities, there are no economies of scale. And so the customer base, if you offer a unique choice, is so much smaller. And so there are so many forces that are actually not allowing us to have a greater variety of access. That isn't the case for everything. When it serves other market needs, like pattern recognition, and then there's massively life-changing alternatives for people who are blind. When speech recognition, but if you have an average conventional voice. So those things originally started out, or the experimentation on those was done with people with disabilities, but they have become useful for everybody, and so they take off. So where there is another motivation for some of the assistive technologies or alternative access systems, they've progressed quite a bit. I was, though, talking to somebody, or there was a keynote here, and they were saying that brain-computer interfaces now have, as though it was something new and innovative, now have non-invasive alternatives so that somebody can drive a cursor with just thinking. And the irony of that is that that's preceded the more invasive surgeries that implant brain-computer interfaces. And way back in the 80s, we had EEG pattern recognition systems that would allow you to drive the cursor up, down, left, right. So I think there's also not a great memory of what has already been there.
It's probably unfortunately true for a lot of tech. We lose that institutional memory.
Oh, it's amazing to see the span of your career and the differing technologies, just from the early computers that you're talking about and that technology versus, I think you recently gave, it was either a keynote or a session on AI and the intersection between that and inclusive design. And it's just, for me, at least from like my perspective of standing far back and not at the details, I'm like, wow, we've come a long way. But then to hear you say like, actually, we had a lot of this technology before, it's very interesting. Do you think with things like AI and just with the growth in that space right now, that things are getting better or going to get better for assistive technologies, or do you not anticipate much?
Well, okay, so the I characterize AI as having three generations. It's a overgeneralization, but the when in the second generation that we had, and actually even in the third, I think we went in the wrong direction.
Oh, yeah.
So back in the 80s, we were using AI, and it was what I would call a literal system. So we gave a literal command to the AI, and it would follow it. We gave it the full directions. It required a lot more training to do things like voice recognition, and I was working on voice recognition for people with dysarthric speech. So they had to train it quite a bit. It certainly wasn't at the level, so the natural language processing was definitely not at the level of ChatGPT. But when it finally did get trained, it was very well tuned to someone that was far from the average. So it would work very, very well for someone who is far from the average. What we have now is a statistical reasoning machine that reverts everything to the mean. So every decision, every production, every response to a prompt is based upon statistical reasoning. So what that means is that you're always going towards the average. So when you say, have things gotten better, there's amazing functionality, but we are reducing diversity. I call it almost a digital eugenics infrastructure, because we are discouraging those unique things, the quirky things, whether it's in the decision of what is offered by the AI as a response to a prompt, as something that it's generated. It's all based upon the average within this large pool of data. But if you are unlike the average, if what you're interested in is not like what everybody else is interested in, then it doesn't serve you well, especially if the system is being used to sort, choose amongst, filter out people. So like in employment or academic admissions, or to determine whether you get a loan or not, how high your insurance is going to be, or whether you're a threat in the suspicion systems. It's getting worse and worse, right? It is performing very poorly. For people with disabilities, if the goal of what you're using AI for is to become more average, then it works wonderfully. But even there is a differential impact, because it works the worst for people that need it the most. So if you are in, say, a poor environment and all the labels around you are in a different language, and you're blind and you want to use a pattern recognition system, it's probably not going to work very well. If you are trying to ensure that your voice is understandable to somebody and you're using voice recognition to reinterpret it, if your voice or the way that you pronounce things is far from the mean, then it's not going to work as well. And the difficulty with that is that I've heard again and again employers saying, oh, we don't need any further accommodation. There's another employee who's blind and they're using AI. AI should solve this, right? But of course, the problem is that yes, it might solve it for one person, but it won't solve it for the next. And so it's creating almost a disparity within people with disabilities.
That these patterns of exclusion are alarming to me, because I assumed the longer you used whatever particular version of AI you're using, the more it would train around you and your specific needs and kind of like be this own custom channel. And so it's alarming to hear that it's kind of the opposite, I guess.
Well, okay, so let me add a proviso to what I've just said. With Gen AI and with things like the very, very large language models, you've got a foundational model that is trained on trillions, like it's massive, trillions and trillions of data points. And it is an extremely polluted pool. It's a cesspool of everything that could be scraped from the internet. And especially with respect to disability, if you look at what is on the internet related to disability, it's pretty horrific. It's bad jokes, it's portraying people as poor victims or demons, or demonizing them, or there's inspiration porn, as it's called, where you have this story of the heroic person overcoming all obstacles in some miraculous way. And none of that is very accurate. And so when you add your data to that polluted pool, it's still going to be a tiny piece of that. It's like you're adding a bit of specific stuff to a polluted ocean. And so the further you are from the average or the conventional, the harder it is to push that entire ocean into you, like, pour a little bit of dye into and you want to change the color. You need to do a lot more. If you're average or typical, it's wonderful. It works very quickly and very well. But at the moment, there's another turn. There's sort of a pivot point where we're starting to see things like narrow AI, and we're seeing agents which are trained for a very specific purpose. And we're seeing on-device AI. So I'm actually somewhat optimistic that we're turning a bit of a corner where it's not this drive towards Gen AI that can be used for everything, and where we just accept this large polluted pool and we demand more data be thrown into it. But rather we're starting to think about how do we design AI for a variety of purposes.
Yeah, I liked the one size fits one phrase that you used earlier. Is that something you think is achievable when we're looking at something like an on-device AI? If it's like, if I'm using it, it's training off my data. Is that possible?
Well, that's one of the things we're experimenting with.
I'd ask you the easy questions, right?
Can we create this curated? Can we create this sort of curated space where we have bottom-up data, and we can salvage what we can from, say, a large language model. So we'll accept your grammar corrections, we'll accept your spell checking, we'll some of the semantic parsing that you're doing, but we won't let the actual content through, right? Or things like that. So we're experimenting with how do we filter out that polluted ocean and create a data pool that is actually useful and that will serve each individual. We're also, one of the other things we're experimenting with is actually inverting the algorithm, because much of what serving people with disability, or much of the problem with AI and disability, has been characterized as there's a data desert. The AI is biased against people with disabilities because they've been excluded from the data. But even if we have full proportional representation in data, it will still decide with the majority. So that is not going to solve the problem. And it puts people at quite a bit of risk as well. I mean, there's so many things associated with giving up your data. The privacy protections definitely don't work for you if you have a disability, because you'll be unique, you can be re-identified. Removing the items from the data set that apply to you and identify as you having a disability will mean that the system will also not serve you well. And most people, because they require essential services that also then take your data, will barter their privacy for those essential services. So one of the other things that we are looking at is, rather than seeing this as a data problem, see it as an algorithm, like more than a data problem. And so what we've done is we've experimented with inverting the algorithm so that rather than the AI looking for the average, it's looking for missing perspectives. So it's called an exploration algorithm. Who are we missing within our company, or what perspectives? What are the students that have not actually are not part of the pool as yet, etc. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do to counteract that homogenization that is currently happening.
That is honestly sad and exciting at the same time, the uphill battle that, because my first thought was, well, we just throw out the ocean, right? If it's polluted, we just chuck it. But no, a new algorithm sounds better and easier than
and starting completely from scratch every single time.
yeah, no, that doesn't sound smart, does it? No. I wanted to ask about, because we've had a higher level conversation, I wanted to see if you had any real world examples that come to mind about how designing for human uniqueness has reshaped or improved a specific experience.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of examples. Because I'm at a conference where web is a big part of the discussion, the first thing that comes to mind is the web. The accessibility community became involved in the web right from the beginning. And so there was the compunction or the prompt to make things more flexible. And if you were to do an analysis of what are all the web design decisions over the course of the life of the web that were beneficial versus that were destructive or not beneficial to society as a whole, it's all of those decisions that made it more adaptable and more flexible. And the things that caused constraints, whether due to design or due to this proprietary ownership of parts of the web or the monetization of the web, those are the things that caused it to sort of go sideways or to not actually serve the societally positive goals that the web originally had. Another example, more close to home to me. I started a graduate program in inclusive design at OCAD, and right from the beginning, I wanted it to be available to students who all around the world, as diverse, radically diverse a group of people as possible. And I wanted to make it possible for people who had careers, who had families they had to take care of, who couldn't attend university full time. And so I made it hybrid. I created all these structures so that people that had to attend remotely would still feel included. And we supported a whole variety of different requirements in terms of students, including ASL and captioning and the accessibility components, but also other parts of the design that would acknowledge that people have different lives, they have different contexts, and let's make it possible for them to participate. And then the pandemic hit, and everybody had to go remote, right? Everybody was in panic. We didn't have to do anything. We just...
Yeah, you were doing hybrid before it was cool, right?
Right, yeah. Because we recognized that you needed those choices. And so it was seamless. We didn't change a thing. And everybody just kept sailing through the experience. But the rest of the university, that was definitely not the case.
I feel like that's just one of those moments where you're like over here waving the banner. You're like this. like this people, right? Like,
See, we could have had this the whole time. Yeah, I definitely, that felt, you touched on it earlier, but that was almost hard to watch, the way we saw a lot of access barriers come down during the pandemic, and so much was moving to be hybrid or asynchronous or remote, and all, we were accommodating in a way that we had to be. And I remember thinking like, this is great, so much of this is going to stick around, and we will have learned from this lesson, and we just don't quite seem to have in the way that I had hoped.
Yeah,
No, I
that's
absolutely
definitely the
agree.
case. That every crisis well, I hope it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
One step
But
back. Yep.
unfortunately, recently, I'm thinking it might be 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Oh no. Oh no, I definitely feel that though. With even, I was telling one of my friends that it felt like we were a pendulum where we just kept swinging back and forth, and they were like, "No, I think we're more of a spiral. We're like slowly building on the thing that we learned before, even though we're coming back exactly where we were before." And I'm like, okay, hopefully we're one step forward then.
Okay. It's interesting because one of the discussions we have is how do we reduce that polarization? Because if a pendulum, you have just 2 forces. So adding a whole variety of perspectives stops it from swinging to the extremes. And actually, and there, of course, we were talking about not getting to these extremely awful positions or opposing positions, reducing the disharmony and fragmentation that we have within society. We do this exercise where we take a pendulum and then we knock it from multiple directions, and it slowly circles to the middle so that it's no longer,
Yep. Although Catherine has a background in art, and she and I were talking, I wanted to build one of those pendulums with the paint bucket. And so,
yeah.
of course, when you're describing this, mine is flinging paint, just so you know. But
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the other thing the other physics related exercise we did with kids was to show if you wanted to balance a platform on something, then putting things on only 2 sides, it's going to be very, very unstable. The best way to balance it is to position things all around the entire platform. Yeah.
It's really, I like that. I like when people take like a physical, it helps me grasp onto a very abstract idea, but that is very meaningful in the long run. I wanted to ask you if there's anything, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but if there's anything in particular that's giving you hope right now. If there's one thing that folks can carry forward after hearing you today. Is there anything that you're just like?
Yeah, I think what is giving me hope is just the groundswell of communities that have been mobilized to say, no, we're not going in that direction, right? This is enough of this. This has to change. And so I'm taking part in a lot of communities where it's mutual aid, where there's recognition that we are dependent on each other. We do need to support each other. And this notion of survival of the fittest and the increase in disparity is not something that is beneficial to anyone. So I guess it's hope in the midst of something that is really quite depressing in terms of where the world is going at the moment. So I'm trying to take the long view. I'm trying to think, okay, there will be a reaction to what's happening right now. And we hopefully, this will be an even more extreme lesson right now. I'm sort of bracing myself for, okay, what's the crisis that's going to be more of a tipping point, or, and I'm hoping that's not too horrific. I see changes in almost every field right now where people are thinking about, what are the economics of inclusion, and recognizing that there are major economic benefits to it. Even in design, I'm in a design school, but I'm sort of at odds with a lot of the design conventions within that. So, for example, the usual design thinking mantra is the design thinking squiggle, where you ideate and go as broadly as possible, but then you winnow down to a winning solution through some sort of majority rules process, where you iterate, and either with sticky notes or voting or that sort of thing, you come to a winning solution, which you then scale across whatever, all sorts of contexts. And instead, what we've been proposing is what we call the virtuous tornado, where you rather than winnowing down to a single winning solution, because if there's a winner, there's a loser, and guess who the losers are? What you do is you iterate to stretch the system to be more adaptable, more flexible, more expansive, and thereby have far greater longevity. And I think that's the design strategy of this age, because things are so unpredictable, and we need those choices so that when the crisis comes, we haven't put all our eggs into this one winning solution. We have a bunch of choices, and we can adapt and be more dynamically resilient. I don't know if that answered your question, but
that makes perfect sense. It's like you talked about with your hybrid program, right? Because you had that flexibility built in. You started with the tornado, and then when something actually came through, you were able to accommodate the struggle of the pandemic and everything going virtual, because you'd already tested that program out to the very boundaries of how far you could flex it, and it withheld.
Yeah. It goes about all the way back to her very first answer, where she was talking about the one thing people describe you as diversify, right? Where it's just like the tornado of diversity.
Yeah.
I don't think we could ask for a much more perfect wrap up than that.
No.
You brought that full circle.
I am just so honored for you taking time. I know your schedule is crazy right now. So can I just say thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on. Is there any shout outs that you want to give or resources you want to point to before we wrap today?
Okay. Well, we have all of our resources are free. Please steal them. We've white labeled them. You can claim that they're your own. So we're at idrc.ocadu.ca, or if you're interested in AI, WeCount.inclusivedesign with no space or .ca is the other place to go. And we're in the middle of creating an equitable and accessible AI standards with Accessible Canada. And that we just had a public review, so there's lots of comments already, but there will be an opportunity to contribute to that as well.
That's
absolutely
amazing.
Fascinating. You're like on the ground floor of everything cool. Amazing.
I think that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.